Okay, so it's time to get back to some Overwatch then, because we actually haven't had any full matches to take a look at in a while. Because, well, it's been the off-season and the last full matches we had was the Nexus Cup. Or, no, the Next Cup. Not the Nexus Cup. That's a different game. The Next Cup, and that gave us an indication of what was going on in the East region plus Dallas. And it gave us an idea of what was going on with Dallas and where they kind of sized up against other people. But this is the Steelseries Invitational. This is heavily NA based. It's basically NA versus EU because it gave us a look at the Boston Uprising, the London Spitfire, the Los Angeles Gladiators, and the Paris Eternal. And this was going to be very interesting because, well, a lot of new stuff going on here. There isn't a lot of old team stuff going on here. Completely new London, completely new Paris, a lot of a new Boston side. I mean, it's a Boston side still with Color Hex and Punk and Fusions and Myungbong, but the rest are all new. And then you've got the Gladiators, who have added a few people into their new look. Sort of Gladiators 2.0 compared to the Gladiators we saw last season. No more as the OG. Now we have the Muse and things like that. Moss coming in skewed and shoe. So, this was a really interesting one because we didn't actually get to see a battle for EU in this, because the first match was Paris versus Boston and the second match was Los Angeles Gladiators versus London. But these were very good indicators of quite how good these teams were. Now, on paper, of course the Gladiators look like the best team, and spoiler alert, they are the best team, because, spoiler alert, they have the best players. They've got Moth, who is a two-time Overwatch League winner. They have Birdwing, who's also an Overwatch League winner. Kevster's fantastic. They've also got Mirror, who's also a great DPS player. Muse coming in. He's going to be probably a great main tank for this team. Space was already great from last year. Shoe and Skewed. We know about them. Dude. We know Shoe is good. Then you've got the other teams, which it's actually, it was a really good indication, even though it's not Overwatch League, right? So it's not exactly how this is going to turn out. This is not how things are going to go a couple of months down the line, but it is giving us an early indication of where these teams are at. And it is super interesting, these first two fixtures, because they are close. A lot of people expected Boston and Gladiators to roll the EU teams. It did not happen. These were both 5 mappers, which is extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. And yeah, there's a definite hierarchy in this tournament. I think that was clear to see. So, we go into this and we see the Boston Uprising taking on the Paris Eternal. Now, Boston have made a lot of changes. They brought in Laurie, who is head coach of WGS Phoenix, who won Korean Contenders Season 2. Of 2020, I should say. They brought in 937, who was really good with that team. Valentine, who was really good with that team. Stand 1 coming in from the Shanghai Dragons. And then Faith coming in from WGS as well. Soon coming in from the old Paris Eternal team. We know how good Soon can be. And they've added them alongside the likes of Color Hex, Fusions, Punk, and Myungbong. Myungbong was great. The only, we could say, downside loss to this team was the fact that Jerry is no longer there. But then again, they replaced him with a very capable hit scan in 937 and Soon. So, I say very capable hit scans, I should say. We did not see Soon this weekend. Unfortunate. But we didn't see Soon at all. We did see Valentine, IM37, and Color Hex. So it is very interesting. Color Hex this weekend did not look outplayed. He didn't look the best, but he didn't look outplayed, which is good for Color Hex. IM37 looked darn good though. Was impressed with him. And Valentine, Valentine was good at times, but he was forcing the Genji at times, and it cost Boston, not gonna lie. Cost Boston dearly at times, especially in this Paris match. Although they do end up taking a 3-2 win over the Paris Eternal. It was very hard fought. Paris looked good. And if there's one thing to take away from this weekend, the EU teams look good on their brawl. What a surprise. There's a lovely comp going around. It's Diva, Reinhardt, Lucio, Batiste. It's called New Rush. And it is doing very well, and we've seen London and Paris run a lot of that this weekend and get quite a good bit of value out of it. Paris did well. They were not outdone. Boston liked to play the wrecking ball a lot. Stand 1 played a lot of Wrecking Ball. I'm not too surprised. I expected Stand 1 to be the Wrecking Ball player. We didn't see fusions. We did not see fusions at all, which was slightly disappointing. When Boston Uprising were taken to King's Row on the second map, I kind of expected fusions to come in to match the Reinhardt that would be put out by Dunn of the Paris Eternal, and it didn't. Dunn ended up getting extreme value on King's Row. Paris, this was a good performance from Paris, and they could easily have taken it. However, Boston could have been better. That is something I will highlight, and I will say I think Boston could have been better. And maybe it's going to take time for this roster to gel. The early indications are Boston are going to be okay, but they are not going to be brilliant. They are not going to be top 10 if they are going to carry on like this. Valentine cannot force the Genji like he did on the attack of King's Row. It lost him that map. It was terrible. He was relying on blades, he was getting nothing in the solo fight, and he was just feeding his brains out just to get his blade. It was really not great. It really wasn't. Paris, though, should be very proud of it. Naga looked great. Onigod looked real darn good. Onigod was keeping up with Iron 37, and that was really good. That's something you want to see from Onigod. Suna, we've seen this weekend as well, and also didn't look bad. Elivo and Dunn. Okay, so they were probably the second weakest or weakest tank line in the competition, but they weren't outplayed, which is really, really good. I was worried about Dunn, but he did keep up with Stand 1. Although, would he keep up with Fusions if it had been him on the Reinhardt? And Dunn did not want to match the ball. Simple as that. So, yeah, it's debatable, but I would say it's promising for Paris. I would say that. Obviously, with this 3-2 win, that means Boston Uprising would move on to the final, but who would they face? Would it be the Los Angeles Gladiators or London Spitfire? And I think this was an incredible match. Oh boy. I expected the Gladiators to pretty handedly sweep away the Spitfire, whether that would have been 3-0 or 3-1. This was not the case. This was a 3-2 for the Gladiators. London held their own. Very impressively held their own. We didn't see any hybrid. We did not see any of Sparker either. Sparker won't be eligible at the start of the season anyway. But we didn't see any hybrid. Probably because he's still in the UK and can't travel. It was Shax and Blase the whole time. We saw obviously Molfig and Haddy, and we saw Calyx and Ripper. And notable, we saw a lot more Moira from London, from Ripper. Not quite sure why, but yeah, they were pretty much the only people that actually wanted to run Moira. Interesting, but it was decent. It was decent. I won't say it was anything standout, but they played a lot less Batiste than the other teams did. So that's something to note with London going into this season. Calyx, he looked fine on Lucio mainly. Things like that. He actually looked fine, Calyx. Can't moan about him at all. Molfig and Haddy were impressive. They kept up with Muse and Space. And I think that's incredible, considering the power of the Muse and Space tank line that we could see this season. It's early days for them, but I think that was impressive, especially Haddy. Haddy had a very good time on the Reinhardt. Very good time. I think that's a very big bonus for London. Shax looks fantastic. He did very, very well. Kept up. Blase. Blase's Maywalls were very good. I did like Blase's Maywalls. He did play quite a bit of Sombra to match Birdring, who was playing the Sombra on the other side. It was a really odd match when it comes to Sombras. Neither of the two were that brilliant, but Blase was matching Birdring a lot of the time, which I don't think a lot of us would have expected. Blase, he doesn't look as bad as he was. I will say that. It's early days. It's off season. It's not the season yet, but he doesn't look as bad as he was. So I will give Blase a pass right now. London went toe-to-toe with the Gladiators and did well. Gladiators liked to play a lot of double bubble, and Muse liked to play a lot of the Winston, and when he was on that Winston, he looked very darn good. When on the Reinhardt, I think the tank line was pretty even, actually. I think the tank line was pretty even. But when there was a clear difference when Muse was on that Winston, Space on the Zarya, it looked real good. It looked real good. Birdring on the Sombra wasn't anything to write home about. Kevster though, oh, Kevster's looking nasty on that flex DPS role. Oh boy, that Echo was nasty. I really like that. Moth was okay. I would say there was more standout members of the Gladiators than Moth. I would say that. But he, this is Moth. Shu, he was real good at times. Like real good. This is the Shu we expect coming in from the Gladiator from the Guangzhou charge. I think Shu had a nice weekend for the Gladiators, and I think it's promising. I don't think some people will say, oh my god, they got taken to 5 mats by London. They won't be that good. They'll be like 7th or 8th. I disagree. I don't think this is the Gladiators playing necessarily badly. I think this is London playing quite well. In all honesty. There was some iffy fights from London, that's for sure. And there's still work to be done. But I think this is more London playing well than it is Glads playing badly. The only thing that perhaps let the Glads down was the Birdwing Sombra, which was less consistent than you would like. He sometimes hits some big EMPs, sometimes he ends up losing a Sombra duel and a Sombra 1v1 in the backline to Blase. That's kind of weird. And when it comes to being 100% on your ult and 80% on your ult, Birdwing has his ult, Blase doesn't have his ult, he loses a 1v1 to Blase in his own backline. That resets it. That means both of them are going to have their ults by the time Birdwing comes back, and it changes the perspective of a fight. So it was an iffy weekend from Birdwing, but he was on a pick that he's not massively known for, so I think we can let that slip. In the end, we got Los Angeles Gladiators versus the Boston Uprising. This wasn't close. This was the Gladiators winning this 3-0. Now that tells me that possibly London were the second best team in this competition, just didn't get a chance to go up against the Uprising and show it. And so, what does that say about Boston? If London can take Gladiators to 5 maps and Boston can't take a map off of them, I don't know what that says about Boston Uprising right now. There's a lot of work to do there, and it's a really mashed up team. A lot of different languages, a lot of different regions, all mashed into one. And we do have our reservations on whether it's going to work or not. And it appears to me, out of all of the teams in this competition, yet again, it's the Boston Uprising that have the most work to do ahead of the Overwatch League season. London look like they're making headway. So do Paris. Gladiators look like they're on track pretty much. Boston, I expected better. I thought they would get a much easier win over Paris and they will be able to challenge, or at least take a map off the Gladiators, but it just hasn't happened. And that's kind of disappointing from a Boston Uprising point of view. But yeah, we will see when the Overwatch League starts. We are about 45 days away from the league now, not too long. About time we started doing some team previews pretty soon, methinks. Look out for that one. If you want to look out for that one, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell, you'll know when those videos come along. All of the socials are linked in the video description as per usual, including the ones for Illusion Gaming and myself. But for now, thank you guys so much for this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then!